So here's another example of using a class, but also using switch statements. So let's take a look down in main and then we'll look back up at class. So in this case, this program is looking at a choice that a player or a user is making between a different beverage. So we've got Coke, Pepsi, sparkling water, or bottled water. So we want to determine if the two users are typing the same entry, but we're thinking about this user entry. Let's give it some more functionality. So that sounds like a class. So let's write a class for the user entry. So going up here, we've got # include IOStream. We've got # include string. And then we're going to use a new include file, which is cctype. And that's going to allow us to do a little bit with the input to convert all input to uppercase. So here's our class. We're going to call it class input char. Same thing, open brace, close brace, semicolon after the close brace, because this is your class prototype. Our two things are going to be a character that the user is going to enter, and then also a string if the user is going to enter a string. And then the way we're going to interface with this is we're going to use a default constructor, and then we're going to have a function that's going to then read in a value. But now we want to go back and see if we have two values that are identical. So we can do an operator overload and put it in the class. So we're going to give this double equals, which remember is going to be an equivalency. So an equivalency test, is this actually equivalent to that in an if test? We're going to give that double equals operator some function in the class. It normally wouldn't have, there wouldn't be any way for C++ to know what that means within the context of this class unless we tell it. So we're returning a Boolean because when we use the equivalency operator, we want to return a true or false. We're using the keyword operator to tell C++ an operator is coming. We're going to use the operator that we're going to overload, and then now we have two things that we're going to compare, a right-hand side and a left-hand side. With this operator, we don't want either of them to change, so we're going to use that keyword const to say that both sides are going to be constants. So here's our right-hand side, here's our left-hand side, and yeah, I know it's switched. That's just the way C++ does it. And our right-hand side is going to be RHS. We're going to use this ampersand operator. We'll talk about that later in the course, but for right now, just know that it needs to be in there. And then our left-hand side is going to just be the variable that we use. So we just use const to say that we're not going to change it. So let's go through everything in our class. So here's input char. So this is our constructor. So it's class input char. So input char : the constructor input char void. And then we're going to set char prompt equal to 0. We're using the single quotes because it's a character. So we just initialize it. We're just sticking something in there. Now we want to do a read char. So now we're going to do something a little bit more sophisticated with our reading of input. And we'll keep coming back to this concept as we go. But we're going to use a cin.get. So this is a function that's part of cin. We haven't used it before. And it's going to go and grab a character out of the input buffer. It's going to store that character in char prompt, which we have defined as a char character here. And then we're going to use this toupper function that comes out of cctype. So we have to do std : toupper. And we're going to send it the letter character that we just read. So this will convert it to uppercase. So if you typed in a lowercase c, it would now become an uppercase C. Now we're going to do something with cin. We want to get rid of whatever else is in the input buffer. So we're going to get rid of everything until we hit a return character. That way, if the user typed in something like Coke, C-O-K-E, and pressed enter, we just read in that first character C, and we're going to dump the rest of it. So the way we dump it is std::cin. We're going to use another function out of cin, which is the ignore function. Open parentheses, and the way ignore works is you give it the maximum number of characters that you want to ignore, and then comma, and then you give it the character that you want to ignore to. So we're going to ignore either 1,000 characters, or we're going to ignore until we hit an end of the line character. So the \n would give us that return end of the line character. Just for debugging, you could, while you're trying to debug this, you could have it print out to the screen what the user typed in, but then once you get it working, and you no longer needed that for debugging, you could comment that out. So it's just an example of using comments to help kind of go through your code. Then we're going to return the uppercase character. Now let's look at how this operator overloading works with our class. So we're returning a true or false, so it's a bool. It belongs to class input char, so there's input char : there's our keyword operator, there's the equals equals operator, and that's the same stuff that we had up there. So the right hand side and then the left hand side, both of those are going to be a constant. Notice we don't have a semicolon here though, we have open parentheses. So this is acting basically like the same thing that we do with a function declaration, right? Now this is how we separate the two variables. So the left-hand side is going to come in just with the class, and so we can access the character by just using char prompt. That's the private variable of class input char. So, but for the right-hand side, we call this RHS, so we're going to do RHS dot. So RHS takes over and now means the instance of the class for the second instance of the right hand side, and then dot, and then that same variable name. So this means the char prompt that belonged to the right hand side, this is the char prompt that belonged to the left hand side. So if those two are the same, then we return a true, otherwise we return a false, and we close the operator overloading. And then now we go down to main, and let's see how this is going to function. So we're going to create input char, and we'll create two instances of this. So one of them is going to be my char, and the other is my char2. Both of them don't have any variables that we're passing to them, so they're going to be running that default constructor. We're going to create a character variable, so char returned char, and then we'll print out a header, and then we'll do return char equals my char, that's from class input char, dot read char, so it's going to use that function. So it's going to give us the uppercase value for the very first letter that the user enters. Now we've got our switch statement. Remember that we can use switch on integers, boolean, or characters, also enumerated variables, but we're not going to talk about enumerated variables in the course. And since it's set up with a character, it's going to be case, single quote, C, single quote, colon, and then there's the case for C, there's the case for P for Pepsi, there's the case for S, there's the case for B, and then there's our default case. So if the user typed in anything else, it's going to print, I'm sorry you didn't follow instructions. Here's our code for the second user. It's going to use my char2.readChar, and it's going to be the same switch statement. And then to verify that operator overloading, we're going to do if mychar, so that's our first instance of the class, is equal to mychar2. Now that we've loaded something into that variable, then it's going to print out you ordered the same thing, otherwise it'll say you didn't order the same thing. So let's run it. So let's do C for Coke, and then just to verify, we'll have the second user type the whole word Pepsi with a lowercase p, and so it pulled that P over, capitalized it, and understood that that was the capital P option here, and it says you didn't order the same thing. So let's close this and let's run it again, and let's have the first user type that in. Again, it recognized that. The second user is typing in a C for Coke, and then it recognized that we ordered the same thing. So a lot of really complicated concepts going on in this program. The point is just to kind of expose you to some of this, and then we'll keep working on these concepts as we go along with the course. So thanks for watching.